I'm Didi. I'm part of EMEA AI and IoT team. Today, I'm going to talk about a wonderful topic, Trustworthy AI. The agenda for the day, if you look at, there are 4 things that I want to talk to you today about. I think all of you know that AI has been contributing to the various economies in different ways. We have seen AI is contributing the growth in industrial revenue from 3% to 12%. So first we are going to talk about certain statistics that will be focusing on growth in AI adoption. I think what next we are going to focus on, we are going to talk about a lot of challenges that we have seen in the past and failure and not so trustworthy implementations of AI. This is an area of immediate concern for a lot of policymakers. We are going to talk about some examples from past known challenges. Regulations are necessary not only to encourage AI, but also to manage associated risk. If we have a mature regulatory environment, then whether the AI process that we are following is simple or complex, it will minimize non-compliance and the chances of failure. Most of the countries and regulatory agencies, software developer communities, industry boards have recommended various regulatory principles, and probably we are going to focus on a few of them as we move on. Another area that we are going to focus, we are going to talk about how these regulations can help us manage different types of biases. These biases do exist, from data bias to model bias and decisioning bias. We need to understand whether these biases has been created by human decisions or it may reflect historical or social inequalities. So we need to focus on these biases and we need to find a way to manage them. So these are the 4 areas of our discussion today. Now, if I ask you a question, after Industrial Revolution, what are the top 5 technological innovations, advancements that have changed the way we live, changed the way we work, changed the way we think? If you look into that, these are the top 5 innovations. Internet has changed the way we think, live, and work. Mobiles, IoT, big data, and AI. We are going to focus today on the interesting topic, which will be covering AI. Now, the first piece which I talked about, the way AI is contributing various economies. Now, I'm going to share certain interesting statistics. If you look at, as per McKinsey, the AI contribution to incremental GDP to US in next 10 years would be to the tune of 15%. And in dollar terms, this would be around $440 billion. So AI would be adding an incremental GDP to US to the tune of $44 billion every year. AI is going to impact most of the economies, whether it will be impacting the Latin American countries from 5% or the South Asian countries to 26%. Another statistics which is very much interesting for software companies like us, software market for AI is supposed to grow 5 times in next 5 years. This is the area of fastest growing segment to be in, and thank God we are in the segment. How do another statistics? You'll also like to know that. So we understood that AI is growing very fast. It's going to impact all the economies, whether it's going to be a small or it's going to be a big. Now you might have this question: how different countries have adopted and matured AI technology? Is there any ranking that we have which can help us understand where do different countries stand? Now, if you look at this slide, you will find that the United States of America, I think it's a leader in the top 12 economies on the chart, and it has I think it's benchmarked with almost 300 plus points, and the mostly I think the technological investments, investment in research and development, and investment in people. These are the three top focused area for US, and that has resulted US into the top league of the countries when it is ranked and benchmarked and compared with other countries. There is another point I wanted to make it very clear. People believe that AI is primarily automation or intelligent automation or analytical automation. Now, we need to understand that AI is not only automation. The top use cases, the slide that you have in front of a screen is actually, this talks about the top use cases across all sectors and all industries. Yes, primarily the intelligent automation is one of the largest use case, but that is not the only one. You will also see on the presentation, on the slide, that the quality improvement, finding out the anomaly detection in the quality process is as big as innovations as big as automation. Cyber security, customer service, risk and compliance, sales department, workforce automation, workforce management. AI is impacting almost all departments, all industries. And given the day, given the era we are in, it's impacting all our human life. So these were the first part. This was the first part of the section where I wanted to put a focus on how AI is going to impact our life, how AI is, the different use cases are impacting the way we live, the way we think, and the way we work. But now we need to also look at, had there been any challenges from the past implementations in that we have? Do we need to learn whether we have implemented this into a most ethical way, or we need to improve the trustworthy implementations of AI? Now, if you look at the second part of the presentation, this is where I'm going to focus on the potential biases, the challenges that we have faced. What we know that AI is the greatest innovation of our age, and it's impacting almost all industries, all economies. But we need to understand that there have been many challenges and challenging examples, failures and unethical. I will not say unethical, I will say that not so trustworthy implementations. Let us look at a few examples. First example that I want to talk about is, I think all of you would have seen, and you would have been aware of this application. It was a chatbot created by Microsoft. This chatbot was created by Microsoft, and but it was taken down in less than 1 day. Tay joined the Twitter, and when the chatbot started, responding with the tweets were not so ethical. The challenge was, and the real challenge that in the design of Tay was that it was learning from the tweets, and those tweets were not so balanced. Hence, and I will just take a few minutes to show you a few sample tweets. So probably, just have a look on the way the Microsoft chatbot communicated with the people. Look at a few tweets and the communications. This is where they crossed the boundary, and it responded with some of the unethical ways or unbalanced. It communicated some unbalanced messages. This was the reason Tay was taken out in a day. And what was the learning behind this? The learning behind this was that if any AI system that is fed with bad examples would end up with an inappropriate solutioning application. So the quality of data that we are feeding into the AI application is extremely important. Data management plays a bigger role in AI systems when we are trying to automate the deep learning and machine learning algorithms. The second example that I want to talk about, Amazon's same-day delivery. I think all of us in our areas, in our countries, will have something or another things like Amazon. Amazon have the same-day delivery module for selected neighborhoods. And the logic, when initially it was launched, they tried to find out the areas where they had the higher concentration of Prime subscribers, just to justify the high operational cost for same-day delivery. But what happened, what was found later, that they actually identified those areas that were mostly non-Black population, the areas where mostly non-Black population were living. And the areas where Black population was living was completely excluded from the same-day delivery module. So the challenge here is that though the concept or the logic was that, where the Prime subscribers are based, we need to roll this out. But at the same time, the approach would have been better if the approach should have been a little bit balanced with the various sectors and the communities. The third case which I want to talk about, which is extremely critical, and I think you would have seen this, and you would have seen this in the past. One of the cars, one of the autonomous cars, which was tested by Uber, I think 2 years back in the state of Arizona. Actually, it happened that it met with an accident and it killed somebody on the road. And the challenge was, now, why did it happen? The challenge was when the programmers programmed the object detection module for autonomous cars, the system will classify an object as human only if it was near or it was on the crosswalk. So the assumption that we had while building the system that humans will cross only where they are supposed to cross, on the crosswalk. And if the humans are crossing not on the crosswalk or near on the crosswalk, the car was not supposed to identify that object as human. So though I still believe that autonomous cars will reduce a lot of accidents on the road because majority of them are done by human error. But such situation actually created a conflict. Who holds the liability? The application developer, the decision maker, the driver who was sitting in the background, but he did not take the action. The machine learning algorithm, if it is alerted the driver to disengage the autonomous mode, and if the driver did not take the control, probably the driver would have been responsible. But if the module did not alert it, then somebody has to be held responsible and liable. This brings another challenge. The liability, who holds the liability for AI failures? The last two examples are a little bit correlated. The first one, the smart hubs, like automation, one company in Berlin, which has this light automation system implemented, they had some problem with the exception handling. When there was some failure, the exceptional handling unit was trying to tell the hub that it needs to do something, it needs attention. And it created so many alerts that the whole system, whole network got overloaded and freeze. The last one was an Autobot. One of the telecom company in Australia tried to fix the issues through Autobot. What happened? In some scenarios, that human would have understood better, taken a right decision better, but Autobot could not take a proper decision, resulted in millions of dollars of wastage of money. So the common learning behind the last two scenarios is that if there are any exception handlings, the situations which are uncommon, something that we have no past data and probably those systems have not seen them, they are tend to failure. And human is supposed to do a better job in those situations. Now, if you look at what we need to do in those situations, probably what we need to do, there are a lot of things that could be done. The data quality is extremely important. Whether we are having a narrow AI, whether we have sufficient representable, unbiased variables, drivers, features to explain the outcome, and so on. So these were a few examples from the past where we had to find out how a trustworthy applications, the solutions and applications that were supposed to be trustworthy, but they had their own challenges in the past, and we need to learn from those challenges. Now, let us move to the next section. So we have seen that AI had been a fastest growing technology of our time, and what we have seen that it has its own challenges. What about regulations? What regulations are doing? Now, the closest regulations to us is the European Union. Let us start with what European Union is doing on this. So I will summarize. I have added a link to the original session of European Union AI Alliance that ran for a good number of hours. So if you have time, please have a look on it. But let me summarize this. Last year, 2019, a high-level expert group of people on AI, they presented the ethical guidelines for trustworthy AI. European AI Alliance, that has more than 3,000 members, they outlined that trustworthy AI should be lawful, ethical, and robust. So if somebody asks, what is a trustful AI? In a plain and simple English, they told that it should be at least lawful, ethical, and robust. At the same time, what they have done, they talked about 7 requirements for AI system. The requirements that focused on human autonomy must be kept, whether humans on the loop or humans in the loop or humans in complete control. Whatever be the module, whatever be the mode, human autonomy must be kept. It talks about technical robustness and reliability. It talks about privacy and data governance. It talks about transparency. This is where SAS focuses a lot. Transparency, which is traceability and explainability. SAS has incorporated this in the solution making. Fairness and diversity. Social and environmental wellness, accountability. So these are the 7 requirements which has been put by European Union. And I encourage you to have a look on the video of the AI Congress, which I have put on the slide. But is this the only regulation? So what is the challenge with the AI regulations? The challenge with AI regulations is that there are many and really many regulations. There are more than 50 regulations at the moment when we are talking about. So you might have this question: does EU regulations captures everything? We need to explore. Now, if you look at these slides, there are some 12 regulations. The another slide, another 11, 12 regulations. But the interesting piece, which I want to spend a little bit more time, is this paper, which is actually the ethics of AI ethics. It actually compares. Almost 22 different ethics, and it tries to identify whether these different ethical guidelines are actually capturing same thing, or there are not that many overlapping topics. So what I have done based on this paper, which was written by Thilo, and this paper got published this year, Mind and Machine 2020. He actually compared these 22 major guidelines. And the key finding, I will talk about one or two key findings which I have provided here. The one key finding is that none of the AI regulations address all the key issues. And the second is, if you look at the superset of ethical issues, like the European Union talked about the 7 critical issues I just shared. There are many separate other issues which were discussed in IEEE regulations, which were discussed in Information Technology Industrial Council, which were discussed in the partnership on AI. So what we have done, we have provided a superset of ethical issues. The box on the left-hand side actually captures the superset of ethical issues. All these 20 regulations are talking about these issues, these 20 issues. And this brings another challenge. Now, this is something which we need to understand. So let me go to the next slide. The challenge here with these many regulations, the question you might ask, why we have so many regulations? Do we need so many regulations? And you might also ask, are they sufficient? The answer to them that the AI regulations mainly right now, they are serving as a marketing strategy. They serve, they are mostly created and designed and launched as a marketing strategy. And that is why probably we have so many of regulations. The other few challenges with so many regulations are, it lacks mechanism to reinforce. Ethics guidelines suggest that, it says that the internal self-governance in science and industry is sufficient. But is it? The second challenge that it has is that it is really very high level. It needs to be translated for actions and recommendations for organizations, similar to the risk regulations, similar to the compliance regulations in the banks. The AI regulations needs to be translated and documented so that similar to the risk officers in the bank, the compliance officers in the bank, AI officers in the bank who know whether they are following the right process while developing and building an AI solution or system. The liability for harm is still unclear. The legal framework is still weak. Who should we blame? The car maker, the algorithm maker, the decision maker, or the driver who did not take the control at the time of emergency. Another challenge is that this is running, both the regulations and the software development process is running independently. There is very less impact on software development lifecycle. So we need to integrate the regulations in the software development lifecycle, SDLCs. So this actually summarizes, this slide actually summarizes why we have so many regulations. Are they sufficient? And if not, then what exactly we need to do with those regulations so that it is effective. The last piece of the puzzle which we need to solve is how do we do this? From data to decisioning. It is extremely important to know that the modeling is just one piece. The prediction is just one piece. What is equally important is that the decisioning engine. The more important is the decisioning framework. So we need to monitor the process from data to decisioning, not only in the middle piece or the modeling piece or the model development in the model development process. If you look at the challenges that we have if you look at the challenges that we have in terms of the biases, I think the biases are areas where the system discriminate against certain people, certain group. And I will not go into detail, but I think there are three things we need to do. We need to understand bias. We need to understand how bias is created. We need to understand how it is manifested in the data used by AI algorithms. The second thing that we need to do is we need to mitigate those biases. We need to find out our own approach to tackle that bias in different stages of AI decision making. We need to understand while doing the pre-processing, post-processing, in-processing, what are the various methods for mitigating bias. And this is where SAS can help you. I will not do too much of safe discussion, but SAS has invested heavily in creating approaches to mitigate bias. Accounting for bias. The last thing we need to do is that we need to find out the approaches that account for bias proactively, not reactively. So on this slide, I suggest you please have a look on the various types of biases and the different actions that needs to be taken care of. Now, going to the next, how we do this in SAS. SAS has a well-defined process from data to decisioning. When we do the pre-processing, when we prepare the data, how do we understand the unfair variables? How do we understand the representative variables? Explore distribution. How do we understand the privacy issues? So an approach has to be adopted while doing the pre-processing. Similarly, in processing, how do we expose bias during model development? After processing and decisioning, post-processing, monitoring the performance continuously, monitoring the new data that is feeding the model continuously, because we are retraining the models as we move on. It's not static activity. So we need to also understand what type of data that we are feeding into the system. It's not one-time activity, because every time we are feeding the system with the new data, that data needs to be tested. It might happen that the data that was used originally is different and the data that is used for retraining the model is different. Post-processing, managing responsible decisions, how we do that? Are we making the, can we do a pre-deployment audit? Can we do a checklist for ethical validations? So this process, end-to-end process, is extremely important for a responsible AI and trustworthy AI implementations. The next slide is mostly some of the explainability features which we have in the solution, which probably I will not go into the solutions too much. But the idea here is that can we have some by default features which can help us in explainability and so on. The last slide, I think I'm running out of time. The last slide that I'm having in my screen is what we need to do from the organization perspective. From organization perspective, I think we need to do a couple of things. We need to communicate. We need to prioritize the importance of responsible AI. We need to design standards. We need to write policies and guidance for the teams to follow. We need to train our people so that they focus on responsible AI development. And it is better to do internal and external audits on the internal process, on the AI process. In the same way, our accounts are audited. In the same way, we have the risk auditors. and they audit our books. In the same way, we need to get the external auditors auditing the AI process. So I believe that these are a few things that we have to do to infuse responsible AI into the development life cycle. And it requires involvement of the entire organization. So probably I think this was the if I have a few minutes, I can just summarize, the session. We started talking about AI, one of the top 5 most important innovation of our time. We have seen how AI is contributing in the various economies. We have seen, at the same time, we also saw that there are certain implementations that were not so trustworthy, and there had been some challenges in building trustworthy applications. We found out that there are many regulations which are trying to govern the AI process, trustworthy AI process. We have seen a comparison of almost 22 different ethical regulations, and we found out that there is a superset of ethical issues that needs to be addressed. At the end, we discussed what could have been various approaches to manage the biases from data to decisioning. And we also talked about organizations need to take a proactive approach. They need to look at AI process audit. They need to audit their current AI process in the same way they audit their compliance, in the same way they audit their risk. And they need to educate their teams that why this is so important for the whole organization. If you have any more questions on this topic, if you have any questions, please reach out to me in the Q&A sections. I will be more than happy to answer the questions that you will have. In case if you want to reach out to me through an email, my email ID is also there on the last slide. Thank you.